welcome back to Control the Freak. Sorry, there's been another little gap. A couple of reasons for that. One, I'm recovering from an operation, so it's been quite difficult to get around. And two, Wi-Fi problems again. Little tip for you, never sign up to TalkTalk. Luckily, we've changed provider now, so it should be a little bit more smooth going forward. Story time today for you. I've got a story that's an amalgamation of a couple of stories that I know, a couple of people that I know, but mixed in with just general manipulation and control freak behaviour. And if you've been in a controlling relationship, there's going to be something throughout this story for you that you're going to recognise and say, that happened to me or somebody I know. It's just very general, very common control freak behaviour. But the point of this is, to get towards the end of the story, is to give you a little tool for gaining some clarity and some objectivity. I'm going to use a little bit of CBT tactics and tools. So I'm going to give you two people, I'm going to give you a couple, and their names are Dave and Sara. Sara's background is that she's a little bit of an awkward girl. At school, she was kind of rejected and cast out for no good reason whatsoever. She was a completely normal girl. She was conventionally attractive. She wasn't scruffy. She wasn't poor. She was none of these things. But she's one of these girls that for some reason you get your kind of elite little clique who decide that she's not included. Maybe they felt threatened by her, but the girls certainly cast her out to the sideline. And it's one of those situations that, despite the fact plenty of guys can see that she's attractive and completely normal, nobody wants to make a move on Sara because they fear that they'll get pushed down the pecking order by association. So what this does for Sara is it leaves her quite cast out. And what she does is she deliberately starts trying to become background. She doesn't want to be noticed anymore. She certainly doesn't want to be picked on. So she changes the way she dresses. She dresses almost grey. She wants to disappear. She doesn't really talk to anyone. She keeps herself to herself. And when she goes home after school, she doesn't go anywhere. She goes online and she finds a community online that shares her interests. Things like Harry Potter, things like Game of Thrones, Doctor Who, that kind of thing. And she spends her evenings just talking to people online who are like-minded. After school, this carries on pretty much the same. She gets herself a job, but she never really interacts with people. She's the grey girl. She goes into the background. She doesn't want to put her head above the parapet for fear of going through what she's already been through. And she certainly doesn't go looking for boys. She doesn't think she has a chance. Dave's background is very different. It's similar in the way that he's had his fair share of rejection, but Dave's handled it very, very differently. Dave has got nothing attractive about him. Not only is he unattractive physically, and he makes no effort with his appearance, but he's obnoxious, he's arrogant, he's narcissistic, he's loud. And as a result, he's kind of shunned from everybody. But Dave reacts to that very differently. Dave evolves to dominate people who he knows he can dominate. So he starts seeking out little groups of people who have also been rejected, and he dominates those groups. He inserts himself into them and dominates them. And he has to go through a cycle of doing this because after a while, that group starts to reject him and he has to move on. But he's so dominant within those groups, nobody ever challenges him. And this carries on after school. Life changes after school, doesn't it? You might be having trouble at school, but when you get out into the big world and you mix with people that don't necessarily know you, you can become something else. And that's what Dave does every time until some people suss him out and they move on and he finds a new group. Dave and Sara meet at a party that's thrown by one of these groups because these outcast people tend to generally do the same things that this little online community, things like Game of Thrones, blah, 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 that's all they talk about. So it's one of these parties. Dave gate crashes. He's not invited, but he goes in and he spots Sara in the corner. She stands up. She's a good-looking girl. And he can see that she's surrounded by guys. And he watches from a distance. And he can see that she has no idea how good-looking she is. And that all these guys around her must fancy her, but that nobody's got the guts to make a move. Dave's made this decision. And this girl is now his mark because he knows he's the coolest guy in the room. So he goes over, gate crashes the conversation, plonks himself down next to Sara and starts talking. Sara's never had anyone like this pay her any attention before. A confident guy But here's this guy full of confidence who now wants to talk to Sara. So she's a bit overwhelmed by it, and she locks onto him. She doesn't realise that he spends the next couple of hours just talking about himself, about how good he is, about his plans for the future, how successful he's going to be, how successful he's already been, how much better he is than everybody else in the room. And it doesn't turn Sara off. She's just kind of in awe of this guy's confidence and flattered that he wants to talk to her. So they arrange to meet the next night and they start seeing each other. Now, Dave has already decided he can never let Sara know she's a good-looking girl. He's already sussed that much out. He can never make her feel like she's his equal. So the relationship is one-sided from the very start. Now, Sara hasn't got many girlfriends, so it's not as if she can introduce him to girls. The only people that are close to her that she can introduce him to is her parents, because they already know the same crowd. This doesn't go well. She takes Dave home to her house to introduce to her parents. To say it's a disaster, he doesn't show any interest in anything that the parents have to say. They're quite excited. Their little girl, who spent years alone, suddenly has a boyfriend. There's a bit of a shock when he first walks in the door because, as I say, he's not an attractive guy. But they decide to sit down, have dinner, and get to know each other. But as I say, Dave's only interested in talking about himself. Whenever they try and share something about the family, there's no response to it really. It just moves on to how that story reflects to Dave. He must have something that's kind of connected to that he can use to dominate the conversation. He notices also, the dad, that Dave isn't paying any attention to Sara, really. But when he looks over at Sara, she's kind of love-struck, starstruck, looking at Dave like he's the love of her life. And Dad has to make a decision. What he wants to do is kick this guy out because he's just a really unattractive, arrogant, horrible person. But he can see that his daughter's very happy. And he can also see that she's now got company. She's going to be getting out of the house. And he knows she's intelligent. He knows she's going to suss this guy out. So for now, let her have her happiness and I'll wind my neck in, which is what he does. So the relationship goes on. Within a couple of weeks, Dave decides that some of the guys from that party and in this group that they all know are paying Sara too much attention. It's unwanted and there's ulterior motive there. And he says to Sara, you've got to deal with it. These guys are clearly after you. You've got to tell them to back off. Either start moving yourself back a little bit first, but if they come on a bit stronger, if they don't move out the way, you've got to tell them to move out the way. Sarah's a bit baffled. She's never seen it herself, but she says, okay, then all right, that's what I'll do. He lets this go for a week or two, and he starts feeding stories to Sara that he's having trouble with these guys as well, and he thinks it must be because they like Sara. So now she can't see these guys because there's definitely going to be a problem if she does, and it's her problem because she hasn't sorted it out. So he and Sara move themselves away from this group. He starts phoning her every morning and every lunchtime and every evening after work. She didn't ask him to do this, but there she is. 8 o'clock, phone goes. 1 o'clock, phone goes. 5 o'clock, phone goes. It's Dave wanting to know where she is, what she's done, who she's spoken to. And she starts to notice that each time she mentions she's had a conversation with somebody and a guy's name comes up, Dave goes silent. And after a week or two, Dave starts inserting this guy's name into the conversation, saying, did you speak to so-and-so today? And Sarah's an honest girl, so she says, yeah, I did. And he says, right, don't talk to him anymore because he's a problem. He's definitely after you and it's going to cause a problem between us two. You've got to sort it out. He keeps doing it every day. Did you talk to so-and-so today? And then she'll say, no, I didn't speak to them. It's one of these days that he speaks to her after work. She answers the phone. And she can tell that he's worried. He's feeling insecure. So she thinks, I'll surprise him. When she puts the phone down, she goes round to his house. And his mum lets her in. She goes upstairs and she's just about to open Dave's bedroom door when she hears his voice. He's on the phone to somebody and he's quite angry. So she leans in for a better listen and she can hear that he's telling somebody how angry he is that this girl is making him not talk to people. She's making him phone her morning, noon and night. And she's making him not spend time with people he's been known for years. And he's had enough of it. This is a red flag for him. Sara realises he can only be talking about her, and she's devastated. She doesn't knock on the door, she turns round, goes down the stairs quietly and leaves. A couple of hours later, Dave calls her, wanting to know where she is. And she says to him, I heard what you said on the phone. Dave says, well, what did you hear? And she says, I heard you telling people or telling somebody that I make you call me and I've stopped you from having friends. And he tries to gaslight her and say, I wasn't talking about you. But Sara says, I heard you say she. She won't let me do this. At this point, Dave realises he's only got one option. He's cornered now. So he does what all control freaks do. He escalates. He escalates very quickly, very rapidly, and very loudly. And he starts shouting at her and he says, this is a red flag for me. I can't be with somebody who doesn't trust me. I've told you what was happening and you don't believe me. I can't be with somebody like that. Sarah's devastated and she's very scared. She backs down straight away. She doesn't want to lose this guy. She doesn't want to be alone. This is a massive turning point for Dave. He now knows that he can lie to her outright, knowing that he's lying. And as long as he shouts and backs her down, he gets his own way. Massive turning point for him. This is how things move forward. And for the next ongoing few weeks, Dave has absolute control of Sara outside of work. Thing is, inside work, Sarah's making a friend. There's a lady who started work and she's very popular. She's a good-looking woman. She's very popular. She dresses nicely. People want to be around her. But she's befriending Sara. She's paying special attention to Sara. And they chat about the same things. They're both into Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, etc. So they're really clicking. Sara, over the next couple of weeks, starts dropping little nuggets about her relationship. And it's naive because she's been conditioned to think a certain way by now. So it's not like she's going to this woman and saying, he's doing this, he's doing that. But there's enough in what she's saying that this woman is starting to understand what's going on. She's got some experience, this woman, and she understands controlling relationships. But she's experienced and smart enough to know that she can't jump straight in telling Sara what to do and how she should handle it. Because if you do that too quickly, people can retreat. They get scared that they've shared too much and they'll retreat. And she doesn't want Sara to do that. So for the first couple of weeks, all she does is listen to her. At the end of one of these days at work, as they're both leaving, this lady and Sara, Dave's there waiting. He's decided to turn up to see and check that Sara isn't talking to any boys. And Sara comes out with this lady and she introduces this lady to Dave. Dave has got experience with people who won't put up with him. He's been rejected enough times. And he can tell in this interaction that this lady is one of these people that he won't get away with treating like the people he can dominate. There's something in her air, her aura, that's telling Dave she's pretty formidable, this woman, and he'd be well advised to be careful around her. While they stood there, this lady says, Sara, let's go out for a drink on Friday. And she knows instinctively as well that Dave's a bit of a coward. He's a bit of a bully, and that he's already sussed her out as well. She knows instinctively that if she puts Sara on the spot in front of him, he won't say no. He can't say no because it'll expose him. So Sara kind of looks at Dave and says, can I? And Dave wants to play the cool boyfriend. So he goes, yeah, it's fine by me. But inside he's seething. He doesn't want her to go out with this woman at all. But he knows he can't do anything about it. Come Friday, this woman has a plan. But she needs to find the right time to put it into place. So they go out for a drink. As they're having glasses of wine, Sara's sharing more and more about her experiences with Dave. And she's loosening up a little bit. And the woman's starting to ask kind of gentle, probing questions to get Sara to expand just a little bit more. And it gets to the story where Sara tells this lady that she heard Dave on the phone saying that she was to blame for calling her up every day. And she was to blame for him not having friends. And that's the point that this lady makes a move. And what she does is she uses some CBT tools. Now, CBT used well doesn't tell you what to do. What it does is it invites you to ask questions and answer questions of yourself that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of before. It's a way of getting you to grade things sometimes on a scale of 1 to 5. It gives you a leaderboard to kind of compare against. And that's what this lady does. She starts asking Sara some questions. First question she says to Sara is, how true was it that those guys were paying you the wrong kind of attention, or was that just Dave's opinion? And Sara goes, well, I don't know now, to be honest with you. After everything that's happened, I don't know if they were or if it was just Dave's opinion. So this lady says, okay then, on a scale of 1 to 5, how uncomfortable did those guys make you before Dave turned up? And Sara says, well, 1, they didn't really make me uncomfortable at all. And she says, okay. Then after Dave started saying something about them, scale of 1 to 5, how uncomfortable were you then? And Sara says, well, yeah, definitely a 3 or 4 on the scale of 1 to 5. I was pretty uncomfortable because Dave had pointed out some things I wasn't aware of. This lady says, there's a bit of a difference there, though, isn't there? She says, on a scale of 1 to 5, how reasonable was it that because it was only Dave that noticed the problem and you didn't because you marked it a 1, how reasonable was it on a scale of 1 to 5 that Dave made it your problem to deal with? And she kind of goes in the middle. She says, well, probably about a 3, because if there was a problem, then maybe I had to deal with it. Maybe Dave had to deal with it. I don't know. Sara doesn't see where this is going quite yet. And the lady says, okay, what about the phone call? When you heard the phone call, on a scale of 1 to 5, how true was it what Dave was saying on the phone? And she says, 0, 1. It was completely untrue. I didn't make him phone me and I didn't tell him to stop seeing these people. And the lady says, right, so on a scale of 1 to 5, how upset were you when you heard Dave say that? And Sara says, 5, I was devastated. The lady goes, right, there's quite a difference again there, isn't there? Okay. And she's not kind of drilling this into Sara. She's just kind of looking pensive when she gets the answers. She doesn't want to tell Sara what to do. That's not the point. It's to get Sara to start building a little leaderboard in her head where she's got some comparisons that she can see for herself. And then this lady says, on a scale of 1 to 5, how justified was Dave to be worried about you talking to guys at work? And Sara says, 0, 1, there was no justification. He had nothing to worry about. Then he says, okay, then on a scale of 1 to 5, how awkward did it make things once he told you there was a problem? And she says, well, probably a 3 or a 4. And the lady's going, right, okay, yeah, there's a bit of a difference, isn't there? So she says to Sara, on a scale of 1 to 5, out of all of the changes that's been made to your personal life, on a scale of 1 to 5, how many of them have come from you? And Sara says, don't know, probably not any. So scale of 1 to 5, how many have come from Dave? And she says, well, probably 4 or 5 at least. Yeah, they're probably mostly from Dave. She says, right. Again, there's a big difference, isn't there, here? And she can see Sara starting to kind of tick over in her head that, okay, there's a bit of a pattern here, isn't there? And the woman says to her, do you see what I'm seeing here? I've got no dog in this fight and I don't want to run your relationship for you, but it seems to me there's a real difference between your scores where you're involved and your scores once Dave gets involved. And Sara says, yeah, I see that. She says, one last question for you, Sara. If this was me telling you that this was happening to me, that my boyfriend was doing these things, what would you do? And Sara says, well, I'd tell you to talk to him, and if he didn't change, it's probably not going to work, is it? And the woman decides that's all she needs to hear. She drops it there. She doesn't drill this into Sara. She doesn't say, right, well, there you go. You've got to talk to him, and then you've got to leave him. But Sara's a bright girl. She knows what's going on now. Over the next couple of weeks, she starts applying this scale of 1 to 5 thing. She takes a baseline of how she feels about something. And then when Dave does something, she takes another score of now how she feels about it. And she can see this gap growing. She's got quite a leaderboard of examples to compare to now. She starts to withdraw from Dave. It takes a few weeks. In fact, it takes a few months. There's little breakups here and there. And it starts with only a few hours where they separate. But Dave's got quite a hold on her and he drags her back into his life. Over a couple of months, these gaps get longer until she finally managed to extricate herself from Dave. Because over time, there's enough examples of Dave changing things or demanding a change that changes the way that Sara feels and sees things. And she uses this scale of 1 to 5 to get a kind of watermark of where things are in the relationship. And it's very, very clear that once Dave gets involved or demands a change, the way she feels moves from 1 or 0 up to 4 or 5, how negatively she feels about the changes. This is a great skill, a great tool that's used in CBT. And I kind of wanted to use this story to introduce this tool for you. What it does is give you objectivity. It's not about opinions. And when you do this, you've got to kind of remove fear and too much emotion from the equation. The idea is to look at that scale and give an honest answer, an honest, objective answer. That's how it's going to work. And that objectivity that you put into it at that point will give you the objectivity you need at the end, once you've got all these scales to compare against each other. But the message to drive home is this is about objectivity. So use that scale if you're in these relationships and you want to get a kind of barometer of where you are, of what's going on. Use things like, how did I feel before X changed this parameter? How did I feel before they changed my opinion about this? How much of it was just their opinion? Did they have any facts to back it up? On a scale of 1 to 5, how many facts did they have to back up what they demanded of me? Versus on a scale of 1 to 5, how content was I in that situation anyway before they decided to have an input or demand a change? The next one might be a little bit controversial because I've been made aware of a website whereby some people are making decisions about people's motivations. And I have to question what tools they're using to reach the conclusions that they are. And this isn't about digging anybody out, and it's not about victim blaming, but we're really going to concentrate on objectivity and how dangerous it is to get it wrong. That's going to be in the next episode. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope it's made some sense to you. Start using that 1 to 5 scale to give yourself some objectivity. In the meantime, I'll leave you with the usual. Control the freak, not other people. I'll see you next time. Behave.